for a long time now, all we've been looking at are stories of victims. But last week we thought it would be really nice if we also saw that even though there are a lot of victims there is help. People can heal from trauma through therapy. And we had a guest last week on our show. We had the author, Orange Butterfly. Her pseudonym as an author is October Rain, but her real name is Tunde Ajose Adeogun. And it was a really interesting, lovely interview. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go to our Talk to Jojo Fest channel on YouTube and watch the full interview. She used to be a mental health patient. She suffered from clinical depression, but through therapy, she was able to overcome. In fact, through therapy, she was able to write this book that we just talked about, Orange Butterfly, which is her first book. It's a collection of poems. And she's writing another book. So this week, we are looking at other survivor stories. 2 weeks ago, one of our followers sent us his survival story, and we saw how talk therapy helped him. Today, he's a proud father and a husband and has managed to get his life back on track. This week, we are looking at another case from another follower, and I want to just say a big thank you to all those who follow us that have chosen to share their story to encourage other people who have been through one form of trauma or the other. Now, with this week's story, so many things, show up in this story. First, we see rape. One of the things that stands out, especially peculiar to rape, is that a lot of rape victims tend to have this feeling that they are being blamed, especially the female victims, because usually what tends to happen is comments like, "Why didn't you run? Why didn't you shout? Why were you wearing such a short skirt?" People attack the victim. And so usually with rape, a lot of victims usually don't like to talk about it because by the time they're telling their story, they end up getting attacked. And we see that, with this week's story. The young lady, she pushed everybody away, the feeling of shame, the embarrassment, the guilt that she started to feel. But we see another thing that is usually a long-term effect sometimes of various forms of abuse. We see her going into depression, becoming suicidal in her thoughts. And these are some of the things that people don't realize with trauma. Any kind of trauma, whether it's physical, whether it's sexual, whether it's emotional, it could lead to other things. Now, her case started off with sexual abuse, but we see some physical abuse because when you look at the story, you can see that she was also beaten. We see some emotional abuse as well because she started to think less of herself. She started to condemn herself. She stopped having friends. She pushed everybody away. She stopped her life. She stopped going to school. But one of the other things we also notice, another thing that we notice with this story is that it took her 2 years before she could get to therapy. Now, something I always say to people is that for therapy to be effective, for therapy to work, the person who needs therapy must be ready for therapy. You must be ready to want to deal with, with the issue, with the trauma that you've had. You must be ready to want to talk about it. You look at her story and you see that when she got to therapy, her first couple of sessions, she wouldn't talk. Now, people sometimes will get very upset, with the person who's gone through this because you can't understand what they're going through. Support is critical for a survivor to be able, for a victim to be able to survive. We see that support with her mom. One of the things we don't understand about trauma is that anyone who's been through trauma wants you to understand where they're at. Don't judge me. Don't rush me. Empathize with me. Be genuine in your understanding or your appreciation of where I am. And we see that with her mom. It couldn't have been easy for her mom to have watched her daughter going through what she was going through, but her mom was not going to blame her or tell her that she needed to snap out of it or anything. Her mom was a bedrock for her. Her mom stood by her. Her mom empathized with her. Her mom did not judge her. Her mom was genuine in her concern to help her. Her mom appreciated what she was going through, where she was at, and understood that she needed to walk at it at her own pace. And, one thing people don't understand is that when you go to therapy, as a therapist, we recognize this. We know that sometimes you might come into therapy. I've had people come into therapy and the first 4 or 5 sessions, we don't talk about anything. They don't say anything. We sit through it, we make chit chats, and they leave because they're trying to get comfortable. They're trying to make sure that I genuinely am not going to judge them or make them feel any worse than they already feel. They need to build trust to be able to then take that journey to open themselves up again. But nobody wants to be hurt. So we see that in the story. But what makes me so happy about this story is that today, this young lady is back in school. Can you imagine? She's studying criminology. And she's ready to trust again. She's willing to take that leap of faith and trust a guy. That takes a lot, and she's come to a good place from what we saw, where she realizes that I'm not going to blame myself for this. I'm not the reason it happened to me. The fault belongs to the rapists, not to me. I'm better than this. I have nothing to be ashamed about. I have nothing to feel guilty about. I have nothing to be embarrassed about. And that's how you start to heal. I'm so proud of her that she took that step to start the road to healing. And so next week, we're going to look at another success story. No matter how difficult your trauma is, it is possible. It is possible to heal. I believe that every victim can be a survivor. You just need to want to survive. You just need to want to take that step forward to trust and walk through that trauma so that you can survive. We've seen it with Tunde, who said that for her, through therapy, she was able to survive through her writing. We've seen it with this young lady who took that bold step and went to therapy. And now, she's got her life. It's taken her 5 years or so, she said, but she's gotten her life back. It's not the length that it takes. It's that you make it to the end of the journey. So, until next week, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Talk to Jojo First. Also go and follow us on our Instagram handle at Talk to Jojo First. Like, post, and if you've got a story, a success story, please share it with us so that it can encourage other people. For everyone out there who's been through some form of trauma or the other, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So join our Road to Healing series, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. Have a good day.